Okay, guys, sorry about the sound as usual. Now, I'm going to try and be as concise as possible. This is a very, very important video you have to understand. When I went to economics school, and I went to economics at the University of Manchester, I did a BSc in economics. I got a triple first. Very proud. And what you taught there every day is, why did the 70s inflation occur? It was because of the oil price spike in 1973. The Yom Kippur War in Israel caused a spike in the oil price, and that's what caused inflation throughout the 70s. They teach you this for 3 years. No problem. Only later did I find out it's nothing to do with that. It actually occurred in 1971 when the US dollar abandoned the gold standard and went onto the fiat system, and obviously then it just ballooned and the US dollar lost 70% of its value in 10 years because obviously it was tied to the to gold, which was a real asset, and it was being printed out of existence. So that was the real cause of it, 1971, not the 1973 oil price spike, an absolute red herring. And that's what we're taught for 3 years, and they're taught that, I'm sure, now in economic school. No one ever hears about the fiat system ever in any economic school. So you have to understand that we're in a system of lies, and it takes a lot to reveal the truth. So now currently we're going through massive inflation. Oil is through the roof, $82. All commodities are through the roof. Fertilizer is at its highest price in the US ever. Things are going mad, and they're saying, oh, it's because of commodity prices. No, no, no. Commodity prices is a result of money printing. When you print 25% of all dollars in circulation in 15 months, you will get asset inflation, you will get commodity inflation. That's why I predicted all this a year and a half ago in my videos, right? So it was obvious when you print that amount of money, this is a result. It's not it doesn't cause inflation, it's a consequence of inflation. So that's what people have to understand. So we're in this inflationary environment, we have low interest rates, we have the Fed basically with no bullets left in its gun, but does it? So this is what I wanted to talk today. What does the Fed have left to offset an absolute crisis? So let's go through the first few things. The first one is cash. What they've done is they've tried to abolish cash. Cash is now only 3% of all money created in the system. Only 3%. There used to be $1,000 bills, $2,000 bills. I remember one of my favorite films, Midnight Run. He pays with these $1,000 bills. Every time they're taken to a bank, they're taken out of circulation. There's now only $100 bills. Now, $100 bills used to also be worth, quite a lot. You could even buy, a house for like $1,000. Now they're virtually worthless. You cannot buy much with them, and they're not increasing the denomination of these $100 bills. They're not going up with inflation. So you would expect a $1,000 bill, a $10,000 bill. No, 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 no. They want to stick with this $100 bill and get it lower and lower and lower, and basically annul all cash from the system. That allows the central bank to basically centralize all money printing and know exactly what's going on in the system, because everything is electronic. That is what they want. So that's the first thing. Second thing, SOFR versus Libor. My first economics video was actually about this. At the end of 2021, they are abolishing Libor, the London Interbank offering rate, which is basically used by all banks and insurance companies, everything really, financial wise, regarding interest rates. So what is Libor? Libor is interbank lending. So if I'm scared that you're not going to pay, therefore I'm going to raise the interest rates. And that's what happened in 2008, that the banks were scared, so Libor increased. And therefore that was a sign, oh my gosh, I'm not going to lend to anyone, and the whole system shut down, and the Fed had to get involved and pump money into the system because no one was lending to each other. There was no liquidity in the system. So what they've done is they said, we think Libor is fraudulent. Okay, so we're creating SOFR, right? SOFR is the US repo rate. It's the federal, completely controlled rate. It's whatever they want to tell you. Basically, it's got no basis in actual transactions between banks. It's whatever the Fed want it to be. Doesn't matter what other banks want. There is no maturity rate. There's no yield curve. There's nothing. There's just a number that they say what it is. So it's completely manipulated, and Again, we have to remember CPI, inflation of the 70s. They love, again, another load of rubbish they love saying is, the US tamed it by increasing interest rates above inflation. That brought inflation down. That is not true. What they did is they simply restated CPI in 1980. They restated it and they changed the way it was measured. And so therefore CPI naturally dropped, right? They changed it again in 1990 and they changed it recently, and then their metrics even changed even more. Core PCI, PCE, they just change everything the whole time to make it zero, basically. They don't want you to see inflation. That is their whole point. So if you don't see inflation, you can't ask for more wages. If there's no more wages, there's no wage price spiral, and so therefore inflation is tamed. People get poorer, but there's no inflation. There's less inflation. Let's put it that way. It's not no inflation, there's less inflation in the system. So that is what they try and do. They try and, blind you with what's really going on. And that's what Libor, right? Libor is basically meant to be. Libor would tell you how much the banks want to interact with each other and what their rate would be. And SOFR, therefore, just lies and tells you a fake rate that it won't be. So therefore, no one will know what is the risk in the system. No one will know. Are banks unwilling to lend to each other? Who knows? The Fed says everything's okay. The Fed prints SOFR, no problem. That is what they're doing, abolishing at the end of 2021. Next one, dollar swap lines. So I bet you didn't know about this, but there are a few countries that are allowed to swap their currency into dollars. So Britain, EU, Japan, Australia, these are the major economies can go to the Fed and say, we'll give you British pounds, give you euros, you give us dollars. The central banks can do that to each other. And that therefore allows basically Britain, Europe, not to even need reserve currency. They don't need reserve currency in their central bank, because they can just go to the Fed with their own printed currency and just print it, type it up on a computer, £1 billion, go to the Fed, and the Fed gives them whatever, $1.5 billion in return. So they don't even need any assets on their books, and that's why they don't really have much, basically. They don't care. They can sell all their gold stock and they can sell all their treasuries, and it won't matter because they can just type it on a computer, give it to the Fed, and the Fed gives them dollars. So that's why they're in a special position. Now, in March 2020, because of the massive liquidity crisis, everything froze. So the Fed increased 9 other central banks were allowed dollar swap lines. So Sweden, Norway, countries like that, Switzerland, were allowed dollar swap lines. And so now they also can just type up money, give it to the Fed, and Fed gives them dollars, they can then distribute those dollars to their companies, and therefore stop a liquidity crisis occurring in their country. So that's one thing. Next one, SRF, which is reserve, oh my god, I was going to write it, repo, very good, standing repo facilities. So standing repo facilities, previously what happens, the repo rate is which is SOFR, the repo rate is overnight lending rate. So I got cash, I don't know what to do with it overnight, I give it to the Fed, they give me a tiny bit of interest rate, and then they give me my asset back the next day. So I give them treasuries, they give me cash, then I get my treasury back, okay? That's simple repo. Okay, so the problem with that was, we had repo spike in September 2019, and that's because only the primary dealer banks can access the Fed repo facility. So what the Fed has now done is they've expanded it. So now anyone pretty much can go directly to the Fed. You don't need to go to JP Morgan or other banks. You don't need Libor. You don't need interbank. You don't need interbank anymore. Now you can go straight to the Fed to get your funding. Again, centralizing. The Fed is taking over the entire system. The entire system. Their rate, so far, only them. Dollar swap lines, internationally, absorbing all international issues. Standing repo facilities, also internally, anyone, money market managers, pension funds, normal banks, anyone can now, investment banks can now go to the Fed, even companies can now go to the Fed and get their repo facility. And so that will prevent a spike, because let's say JP Morgan doesn't want to lend to Evergrande, right? So they'll go, oh, I'm not going to lend to you. It doesn't matter. Evergrande can now go to the Fed, who has unlimited printing capabilities and it'll give them money. Well, Evergrande can't because they're Chinese, but I'm saying, if it was an American company. Finally, Treasury swaps. This is mad. This is actually hilarious. So in March 2020, people dumped Treasuries because they needed dollar access. Because what happens is you have margin calls. All these banks have margin calls on their bets on the stock market, and so therefore they need dollars to cover those. So they would just go into their central banks. We need dollars. So the central bank's going, flip. What am I going to do? Am I going to get dollars? I know what I'll do. I'll sell Treasuries. So they dump Treasuries, get dollars, give it to their banks or their pension funds or whoever, so they don't go bankrupt. So the Fed was like a bit scared, like, oh my gosh, everyone's dumping all these Treasuries in one go. That spikes the Treasury interest rates, and basically the whole thing can collapse. What we're going to do is we're now going to allow you to borrow dollars based on your treasury. So no longer do you have to sell it, because if you sell it, you blow the whole treasury market, the bills and bonds market. You blow it up, right? And the Fed has to buy it. So what they've done is they said, no. You just give us your treasuries. We'll lend you dollars. When the crisis is over, we'll give you back the treasuries, you give us back our dollars, and therefore nothing can be seen has happened. These are the ways the Fed is now going to basically control the entire system. They control the entire system now. There is no way out. There is no one else. Forget lender of last resort. That's 2008 lender of last resort. Now it's only the Fed. They control the rates. They basically lend out to everyone. There's no more cash. We're going to central bank digital currency, which means they will also be controlling money going into individual accounts. They will be the only game in town, which is what? Which other economy only has one bank? Communism. Communism only has one bank, right? Only has one bank, no one else, no private lenders. That is basically where we're going. The Fed is going, already basically controls the whole system. The Fed puts, we know that whatever the Fed does, that's what the stock market cares about, and that is where we are. So now the Fed, I'm afraid, is going to own the system, and they have now ways of controlling it, and now there's really very limited ways of a crash actually happening. One would be China collapsing, but even then, as I've said, because the Fed can just deliver that money and that liquidity to people straight away through all these systems and manipulate what people see, so they can't see anymore by the end of 2021 what's happening with the banks, because you've got SOFA. It's going to be, they can keep this show going for much, much longer than people expect.